It's March 10th, 2005, and I must be a little pious today because I'm in church. St. Mary's Church in Champlain, as a matter of fact, with Noel Hinerth. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Haven't seen you in a while. We started before we began with the camera work here and discussing your name. Names are interesting to us, especially along the border. Calvin says there are many ways to pronounce your name, and you said there are several ways to spell it.
That's right, that's right. It's an old name that came over from Germany during the Revolution.
No kidding.
Yeah, they came over as mercenaries, fighting for the British.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Well, how many families are there in this area?
The only one that I know of is ours. And they all settled in Champlain, New York. Oh my goodness, I can't tell you how many years back. And then they split up. Some went to Canada and some went west. The ones in the west, I don't know them. The ones in Canada, I don't know them. Just the ones in this area. My grandfather had 18 kids, my friend. So, that's a big family.
I guess
and they all migrated down to New England for work during the Second War. And there's only one left out of 18. And I'm the only one that returned to the North Country.
Isn't that
amazing?
Amazing. But you said down in the Boston area they spell it differently?
They spell it the same way, H-I-N-E-R-T-H. They say it with a T-H. Up here he tells me, Calvin tells me something I didn't know, but they don't use a T-H up here. So
well, you do.
I do. I'm an old New Englander.
I love it. Well, we're glad to have you back, and there's a very good reason why we're meeting in church. But you've been on our little corner before.
Oh, yes, twice.
Tell me about that.
Well, we did the Shroud when you were working for Wiry many years ago. I won't even venture to say how many.
A long time, because we mentioned my brother-in-law, Don Dajnaw, who's in South Carolina, and those were the days when you were really on the old Shroud circuit back in those days.
I was. And then we did the immigration thing at Champlain about what? Well, maybe 5 or 6 years, maybe more.
Time flies when you're having fun. It's hard to believe Calvin and I have been doing this for 8 years.
That long.
And Bob for 100 years before that.
Yeah, and this is the third time we get together.
So that was your primary career?
Immigration?
Immigration?
Yeah, I'm getting.
For how many years?
I've been there for 25, so it's kind of winding down.
Is it winding down?
Oh, yeah, I'm 65. It's time to think about it.
Are we, you're still a young guy.
I know that.
Are you predicting an end to that career?
No, I'm predicting anything.
You're not telling anybody anything.
Take it as it comes, you know.
But you've always been connected, as long as you've been here, connected with this church. I always think you and...
Oh, yeah. Well, mostly Ross's Point.
Ross's Point?
Yeah, I'm a Ross's Pointer. I moved to Ross's Point 42 years ago. I've been there ever since. Married a Ross's Pointer. And then I taught in Beekmantown for 10 years. They had a school of religion there years ago. Remember that?
Oh, yes.
Right across the street from the Beekmantown Central School. I ran that for 10 years. Then they shut it down, and I came to the Immigration Service. And while I was at Beekmantown, I became a deacon 25 years ago. It'll be 25 years this year, the first class.
Isn't that
So we're expecting to celebrate with the bishop, hopefully in August. It's amazing. When I stop and think of my diaconate, you wonder, most of my work has been with the sick and the dying over the 25 years. And, how many people have you brought to the grave, in 25 years? It's amazing when you stop and think of it.
It is a good legacy when you
when you think of it. And how many have you brought back to the church over the years, It's amazing. It's a rewarding service, I think. And it's a charitable service, by the way.
Oh, wonderfully charitable.
Oh, yeah, we don't get paid for what we do.
Well,
so hopefully we'll get paid someplace else.
just before we stop to a moment to make sure our tape is actually running in that machine that Calvin's holding on his shoulder over there, I want to ask you, when did your interest in the Shroud first begin?
Oh, my goodness. As a young kid, my neighbor, there's an old lady lived next door to me, and we used to go see her, old French-Canadian lady. On her wall, she had a picture of the Shroud, and I was fascinated by that as a kid. And I know it left my mind, and as I grew older and started studying theology, I found it again, and I really got into it. It's amazing how things come back. They just kind of burn an imprint in your head. And since then, I've been really interested in it. And for a while, remember, there was a lot of controversy. We'll talk about it as we go through it. That, it wasn't valid. It was a fake. When I get done, you make up your own mind.
Well, before I even got my coat off, I asked you how many times you've done this presentation, and you don't have any clue.
No idea.
Hundreds and hundreds of times. Hundreds of miles, actually, you've traveled.
All over, yeah. And of course, these, I guess it's the only set of slide that's available on the Shroud that I know of.
Really?
In this area, yeah. They come from Rome. And they're very well done, you know. You'll see a little bit of familiarity with the Passion of the Christ that Mel Gibson put out last year.
Mm-hmm.
They never mention much about the Holy Shroud, whether he got any information from that. He got it from this woman, Blessed Emmerich, this nun who had a vision on the Shroud, on the death and Passion of Christ. But I think you'll see that a lot of it comes from here too. You know, that's which helps to prove, the authenticity of the Holy Shroud. Because there's been a lot of controversy. But like I say, when we get done, you make up your own mind.
This is a very interesting topic. Regardless of whether you're Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, whatever your background is, you can't help but be interested in the Shroud of Turin. It's something that I've also watched, people like you, and television shows and books on the subject ever since I was a child, and I'm sure Calvin is the same. Perhaps we can open a few eyes today. What do you think?
I think so. And there's a lot of good videos out there now on the Shroud.
There are.
Excellent, excellent. And there's one, if you can get your hands on it, 30 minutes, called The Last 18 Hours of the Life of Christ.
Ah.
And there's no theology in it whatsoever. It's all done psychologically, physically, and biologically. And it's amazing. These guys have no religion to push.
No,
they're just telling you the facts.
Just going, yeah.
The facts.
Well, that's wonderful.
And it's really worthwhile seeing. It's really worthwhile seeing.
Well, like you said, watch this presentation today, read the books, get the videos, draw your own conclusions, right?
I'm not going to put anything in your mind. You do it yourself.
My mind is wide open. We're ready to begin a slideshow with Noel Hinerth at St. Mary's Church in Champlain in our little corner. Stay tuned.
Yeah, they showed some more, but I couldn't find it this morning, so anyhow.
Okay, now we're all set to roll. We have to set the record straight before we go farther. We understand you did have another place of employment that we didn't put in the mix.
Oh, yeah, Sheridan, years ago. Old Calvin reminded me of that one.
1960s, he said that's where he met you. How long did you work there?
I left there in '69, went back to Massachusetts, finished up college, and came back to the North Country.
All right. We just wanted to let people know that we didn't want to forget this one extra place of employment.
Keep track of me.
You've been around and you've done things and you've been places. All right. I'm going to let you do a lot of talking. You just run the show and let us know what we got.
Okay. This morning we're going to talk about the Shroud of Turin. To give you some idea of, I know the movie, The Passion of the Christ of Mel Gibson has been very popular. A lot of people have seen it. But the Shroud of Turin is supposedly the cloth that covered the body of Jesus Christ when he was buried. When I get done this morning, I hope you can make up your own mind to the authenticity of this cloth. There's a lot of debate on the cloth, whether it is true or not. Here you have a picture of the face on the cloth. Now, the cloth was found during the Crusades, when the Crusaders went over to the Holy Land to take it back from the Muslims. In Constantinople, the cloth was folded and tucked away in a wall of a church. And the Crusaders found it and brought it back to Europe. And it belonged to a private family for years, the House of Savoy, which is out of France. It went from France to Italy, and it still remains in Turin in Italy. That's where the name comes from, the Shroud of Turin. And it always belonged to a private family until recently. And it has recently been given to the church. And it stays in Turin. Let's take a look at it and see if we can learn something on Christ, the way he died. Here's an old replica of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And you see here in the middle is where the actual tomb of Christ would have been. This is an urn they found, archaeological urn. It shows the tomb of Christ here. I'll just leave this here. Tomb of Christ here.
Wait a minute, I got to get up with you with the microphone.
Okay. The tomb of Christ here with the nails on the top of it. But supposedly, as you know, there are 3 churches built over the Holy Sepulchre. You know, I just kept building upon it and upon it. And also the original Holy Sepulchre church, there are walls behind the new walls that are the original walls of the sepulchre. It's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, I'm going to move a little bit, so...
All right, I'll try to keep up with you.
It's all right. We can try to do something that's little thing's not that long. There we go.
I'll stay with you.
Yeah, this.
I got
Very
you.
good. Okay. So I can show you what I'm talking about. Here you have the Constantinople. It went from Constantinople over to Europe. Now in Turin, the shroud is kept in a silver casket. And this casket supposedly is fireproof. And I'll tell you why. And the casket is stored up here above this altar. So when they expose the Holy Shroud, they take it out and stretch it along this frame here so it can be venerated. And every so often they'll take it out because at the demand or request of scientists, bring it into a lab in Turin and study it. Here's another shot of the same church. Here is the casket, the silver casket. It's rolled. Okay, here we have different pictures of the face on the cloth. Now this is interesting. Here you have a positive, here you have a negative. Negative. These are positive imprints right here, this and this. It's amazing. The picture on the shroud is a negative. So when you take a photograph of a negative, you get a positive. And that surprised them. And the first time they ever took a picture of the shroud was in 1898. When he went to develop his photograph, he was expecting to get a negative. But instead he got a positive, and it scared him. Also, the imprint on this picture, usually a picture is two-print. You know, it's, what do you call it? Three-dimensional. Two-dimensional is usually a picture on a print. This one here is three-dimensional. The scientists from the, believe it or not, there's 3 scientists from the Air Force Academy got interested in this picture, and they went to study it also. They were part of the team. And they were amazed that when they did an imprint of this shroud on some type of a lab machine, it gave them what was I going to say? I just said it a minute ago. A three-dimensional imprint, which really amazed them. So when you get the positive imprint, you can see a lot better. Here you have the face. These are folds in the cloth. These are trickles of blood that came down from the face and the crown of thorns. When you see a little bit later, he's got a couple of black eyes, a broken nose, big lips, because of the beating he took. Here you have the three-dimensional imprint of the photo that they made. You see the eyes are here, the mouth's here. Here's that 3 that was found on his forehead, and of course the center of his face. Here again is that three-dimensional imprint done by the U.S. Air Force Academy. You can see a better imprint here. Here's the face. The face is right here. Now, the clot stretched out. Here is the negative clot. Here's the positive imprint. What you see here is the back of his head, all bloody. The back of his shoulders, all bloody. And you have his legs down here, and the bottom of his feet. The front, the face, his arms folded in front of him, and his legs. That's the same image, but in a negative aspect down here. Now you notice there are little patches here of cloth. At one time, the church it was being stored in caught a fire and burnt. So the cloth was tinged a little bit, because it was folded at the time and not rolled in a casket. So the nuns repaired it by putting pieces of cloth to mend it. But think about it, look at it. Even though it went through a fire, nothing has touched the imprint of the body. It's amazing. Here again, the positive. The front of the positive and the back of the positive. It just shows you the whole thing stretched out. Now this cloth is about 14 feet long. So it's longer than the body, and we'll show you how it's put around the body toward the end here. Here again, the face. Now, in the days of the Romans, when they whipped somebody, they normally didn't whip them to the point of death like they did to Christ. I know of nobody that's ever been whipped that much before being crucified. But these are the type of whips they would have used. Like you see, you have little ball things here with prongs on the end. And sometimes it was leather straps with pieces of bone, depending on what they had. And they would have two people whipping a person at the same time. Now, every little tiny circle you see here on the cloth here are whiplashes. You can count about 140 whiplashes on the body of Christ, mostly on his back, because he was tied facing down. Here's the bottom of his one foot and half of the other foot, because when he was crucified, they put one foot over the other and nailed it. So when they put him in the tomb, that's what happened. You only see the half of one and the full of the other. Here again are other whips that they would have used with metal, leather straps, or bone. And you have two whiplashes that are blown up maybe 100% here. This is one here, and this one here. Here's the back of the body. All these circles represent where the whips cut into his flesh. So when they got done whipping the man, he was nothing like chewed hamburger, all chewed up. Then they threw a cloak over him and brought him to Pilate. There's another thing, too, to remember. From Thursday night to Friday noon, when he was first arrested, he went from Annas, the high priest of Jerusalem. Then he went to Pilate. Then he was brought back to Herod. And then from Herod he went back to Pilate, which meant that he had not slept since Thursday night. So you can see how he was really, really, tired. And then they did the whipping, the crowning of thorns, the carrying of the cross, and then the crucifixion. And he lasted about 3 hours. Physically exhausted. Now this is amazing. On the back of the cloth you have two whips, one white and one black. And that was drawn there by the scientist to show that two whipping people were on him at different angles, taking time, taking turns. So look at this. It's amazing. All the whiplashes on his back, in his legs, and his buttocks. Now he would have been tied like this, face down, and whipped on the back, almost to the point of death. There you go. With two whippers. It's amazing when you think of it. How could he stand that torture? But you got to remember too, if you take yourself and you take your finger and you scratch yourself, the more you scratch, you become numb after a while. Doesn't mean it's not going to hurt. Same here. The more you get whipped, it becomes numb after a while. But then again, it's like anything else. When the numbness starts to wear off, the pain is there. He still felt tremendous pain. And of course, the whips tore his flesh apart. On a replica of the Shroud made in plaster, you see all the whiplashes on his back, from here all the way down. Now you notice here there's a big bruise here, and also a bruise up in here. When he carried the cross to Calvary, he only carried the crossbeam. The upright part was already in the ground, because you've got to remember the Romans used to crucify every single day as punishment. Some were nailed to the cross, and some were tied to a cross. Christ was nailed. Those who were normally tied to a cross, it would take a lot longer to die. And they would stay there until they died, or the wild animals came out at night and ate them up, or devoured them. This is caused by carrying the crossbeam. Here you have the negative and the positive imprint, and it just shows you the blood marks on the back of the head and the blood marks on the front of the face. These here are blown up about 100% on the cloth. The cloth was a linen, piece of linen. And it's amazing, to this day, that cloth still exists and it's not even decomposing. A criminologist in Switzerland was examining the cloth, and he put some tape across the cloth and picked up all kinds of pollen to try to trace. It's amazing, you can trace something by pollen, to trace the journey of the clot from Jerusalem all the way to Europe. And he found, I think it was 13 pollens that existed only in Jerusalem in the time of Christ and no longer exist today. So it kind of proves that the clot was in Jerusalem at one time or other, in the time of Christ, not 100 years later like a lot of them say. Now, the crown of thorns, after being whipped to make fun of him because he called himself a king, the Roman soldiers decided they were going to make a crown for him. And of course, being in this time of the year in the spring, the thorns from the rose bushes or whatever tree they had were pretty hard, like nails. You can see what type of crown they would have made for him and tied it on his head. You can imagine somebody whacking that on your head, the pain it would have caused. And I don't know if they necessarily tied it to his head, but you had to hold it on there some way. Getting ready to be crucified. Remember those two bruises I talked about earlier? You see the cross piece of the crucifix is here. Here's the part he's going to carry, the cross piece. Now, if there were more than one to be crucified, which normally was the case, they would each carry their crossbeam, which weighed about 100 pounds, and they would tie them together by the ankle, as if they're going to run away. And as they were walking toward the place of crucifixion, the soldier could yank on the rope and make them fall. And of course, think about it. When you're walking and you fall, the first reaction is to stop the fall with your hands. Well, if your hands are tied behind you like this, you can't break the fall. So when you do fall, you're going to fall face first in the road. And that's exactly what happened here. Here you have from the falls. They made three falls supposedly on the way to Calvary. This knee is all bruised. This is the whipping. Here's the rope that tied around his ankle, and the one nail in both feet on the cross. Here you go. He's falling here, face first in the cobblestone. Broken his nose, fat lips, puffed up eyes, as you can see here. Broken nose, puffed up eyes, both sides, fat lips. It's amazing. And here again you see very clearly the ropes tied around his ankle, and of course this down to the bone here on his knee where he fell. A lot of weight would hit that knee. When he got to Calvary, they stripped him of his garments. That must have felt good, because by that time the garments had all stuck to the blood, which was drying on his way. And of course it wasn't very cold, it was warm in those days. And the crucifixion, there's different stories on this. Some say that the nails went through the wrist. And others say now in a new study that no, they did not go through the wrist, they went through the palm of the hand at an angle through the wrist. And the reason they always believe they went through the wrist is because in the wrist you have 4 little bones. And the nail going in the center of those 4 little bones can hold the body. Doctors have tried, believe it or not, with cadavers, of putting a nail in the palm of the hand, but it would tear away. But yet, it's kind of confusing. All these people who have had the stigmata, like St. Francis of Assisi, Padre Pio, they've always had the wounds in the middle of the hand and not in the wrist. So a new study has come out and they said,
not everybody knows what stigmata is all about, so
yeah, we're going to explain that. And of course, a new study, because of the stigmata, which I'll tell you what it is in a minute, is that you can put a nail in the palm of the hand at an angle and it will come up through the 4 bones somehow and can hold a body on a cross. Now the stigmata is something that, to me, I'd have to be a saint to receive that, because it's the wounds of Christ while you're living in your body. Like the two wounds in the hands, the wounds in the feet, and the piercing, the hole on the side of your chest here.
And it's happened many times.
Many, many times. And it's not the only priest that we know of that ever had it was Padre Pio, and he had it for 50 years. And the man suffered tremendously. They were saying every night before he went to bed, he would ooze a cup of blood from his body. And they would tell me when he died, they didn't have to embalm him. There was not a drop of blood on his body when he died, the day he died. And the stigmata disappeared, as if it never was there. St. Francis received it about 2 years before he died. And of course, St. Francis went blind. And St. Francis, believe it or not, was a deacon. I'm pretty proud of that one.
You're in good company.
I like that.
I love it.
On the cloth you have here where the nails would have come out on the top of the hand. And of course the blood would have flowed down. And they can pretty much examine this. We're going to show you how he was crucified according to the cloth. It's amazing how these scientists can detect by the flow of blood. Another thing about this cloth. The imprint of the body of the man buried in the cloth burns only the top of the cloth. It doesn't go through the cloth. It just touches the top of the fibers of the cloth. The only thing that saturates the cloth is the blood and the serum from his body. So, how could you paint that in those days? Even if it were, say, only 15,000 or 1,500 years old, rather. Another thing, too, is biologically and physiologically, the blood is flowing towards gravity. No artist knew that then. So these people who say I was painted, it's a hoax. No way. I don't believe it. Here you have the ones that believe that the nail went into the wrist. See the bones here? And the nail there. Now they believe it came up from here and through the wrist. This is just a nail that was found, through digging in that area of Jerusalem. Not necessarily the nail that was used on Jesus, but nevertheless, it just shows you it's all corroded. Maybe it was about 8 to 12 inches long, like a railroad spike, I would say. And of course, the back of the feet, because like I said earlier, one foot you can see the full imprint, the other one only half, because one laid over the other. And here the nail would have gone in at this point, holding both feet together on the cross. Now, it's interesting. When a man is crucified, for any man or any person, in order to survive, you've got to breathe. So when you're hanging there from 2 nails in each wrist or hand, and 1 in your feet, what you have to do to survive is pull yourself up slowly, fill your lungs with air, let it out slowly. Well, how long can you do this? Okay. Here you have the 2 different positions, down and up. It's all figured out, calculated. The actual pivoting he would have done on those 2 nails. And of course, every time he would pull himself up, the nails were in such a place it was touching the nerve center of your arm, it would whack his head against the wood of the cross and therefore drive the crown of thorns further in. There you have the different angles he would have pivoted on those nails. And eventually, you get so tired and cramped up that you die of asphyxiation. You no longer can pick yourself up to breathe. So after he had died, a friend asked for the body, wanted to bury him in a new tomb. And of course the emperor said, well, make sure he's dead before you give the body to his friend. So they pierced his heart. In that moment when they did pierce his heart, a little bit of water or serum and blood came out of the heart, because evidently when you die, they tell me, especially in this position, the blood that's in your heart goes down to the bottom, which makes sense, you know, going towards gravity. And if you pierce it from the bottom with a pierce with a spear like that, and here's the part where they would have pierced it right here, and that was blood that flowed down from it. The excess blood's going to flow from it. There you go. The opening on the side and the blood flowing down. These are the patches we talked about earlier. It's amazing how it did not touch that part of the cloth. Here again, blown up again. And here you have a diagram going through the 5th and 6th rib into the bottom of the heart. Now, when he died, measuring from the cloth, the distance from the lips down to the waist, it's amazing. They can tell you exactly how he was on the cross when he died. Now this is, I don't know if we have a better shot of this. There you go. This is the image they show now. I noticed that just recently. On EWTN they do the Divine Mercy Chaplet in the afternoon, and on the weekends when they have another version they do only on the weekends, and toward the end they show this shot of the crucifixion. When I first saw it I said, that's amazing. Where'd they get that? You know. And of course you have the reason for dying, Jesus Christ, King of the Jews, in 3 different languages: Aramaic, Greek, and Hebrew. Aramaic is the language that Christ spoke, and is still spoken today. The Maronite Lebanese Catholics speak Aramaic, yet they say their Mass in Aramaic. But here you have a pretty good example of how he died after on the cross. Taking him down, just the reverse. Of course, being Jewish, coming down from the cross on a Friday afternoon around 3 o'clock, he had to be buried before sunset, which did not give him time to do a complete job of embalming the body, which would have meant to wash it totally and wrap it in a shroud and put it in a tomb. So they did it this way here. They carried him. They didn't have ambulances in those days to bring him to a tomb, or a hearse. So they just, wrapped him in a cloth and carried him to the tomb. There you go. That would have been the way they carried him. All they did is spread aloe and myrrh over his body. And now you see where the myrrh comes from doing the Magi. It was used for embalming people in those days. It's amazing, though. They say the man would not have stayed in the tomb any more than 24 hours. Because after that point, your body begins to stiffen. And of course, you got to remember, in those days it was warm. And the perspiration from his body, and the blood on his body, because they didn't wash it all yet, and the myrrh and the aloe left kind of a brownish stain on the cloth that saturated it. The cloth that was found in the tomb is not smeared at all, which is amazing. When you and I get up in the morning, we normally sit on the edge of the bed. At least I do. I don't just jump up on my feet into my pants and walk out. I'll sit down and relax and get up. For this to happen, Christ would have smeared the cloth, because he would have had to sit on the edge of the cloth and walk away. But evidently, I was telling you, this imprint is only on the top part of the fibers. It's like an X-ray. It's amazing. And to me, in my mind, that is a proof of the resurrection. That when he rose from the dead, he went right through the cloth. And the light was so bright in that tomb, it burnt an image of him in the cloth, like an X-ray. How do you contest that? Say what you want. Here you have the bottom of his feet, and you can see the imprint of the nail here. And also, in looking at this here, this image, which is some kind of an ultraviolet image of the called infrared, they found 3 fingerprints on the bottom of his foot when they carried him. Not that they can tell who it was, but I mean, that's interesting. That's what science can do today. Burying him in the tomb, of course, putting in the aloe and the myrrh, they would have wrapped him in a cloth. And they would have really tied him into this cloth like a sack. I'll show you. There you go. They began to do it. They're tucking in the extra cloth on the end around his face and his hands. On the side. Folding it on the end. Around the head. And tying him in the cloth, the strips that tied him in the cloth. And they closed the tomb. They went back to finish the embalming job on the day after the Sabbath. Would have been early Sunday morning for us here. And the body was gone, except for the cloth. And it's the same thing. We're going to be having the Gospel of Lazarus this weekend. And here again, the resurrection of Lazarus, when Christ rose him from the dead, after 4 days. Because a person in the tomb for 4 days in no part of the world, it's not a pretty sight. The body has already begun to decompose. This cloth shows no decomposition of the body at all. At all. So I would say he rose and out he went. He didn't have to open the door to get out. And now, I don't know, I've never seen a glorified body, but they tell me that a glorified body can just appear and show itself if it wishes or not. Not everybody, of course. We're going to have glorified bodies at the end of our lives, supposedly, at the last resurrection. But it's amazing. He just goes in and through as he wants. And when he appeared to his apostles in Jerusalem and in the Galilee, he didn't knock on the door, he just was there. Then he was gone. And here we have again another imprint of the face, positive imprint. Here again is a very good imprint of the full front of the body. Here over the eyes, they found coins that were placed on the eyes of the corpse. And when examining the imprint of the coin on the shroud, they were coins that were minted in the time of Pontius Pilate. Because every governor, when he took over an area, he would mint his own coinage. Here again, not necessarily prove, but at least it tells you that this cloth had some ties with Pontius Pilate. Here it is. The coin that would have been, given by Pontius Pilate. It has IACU. Don't ask me what that means. You have a staff here, like here again. Now, some artists have taken this picture and opened the dead man's eyes to say, how would Christ have looked as a human? We don't have, nobody knows. What he have looked like as a human being? And they've also taken the image from the cloth and made an image of his mother, because he had biologically no human father, which gives us a pretty good idea of what mother looked like as well. Here again. Now, using infrared light, you can see the highlighting of all the blood on his face, the red particles here. All the stuff. There's a lot of technology today that you can use to examine something. This is just another way of looking at the image under another light. You have, again, the positive and negative. Another faded image of it. Another type of light. Many icons from the early church, it's amazing, are replicas of the face on the shroud. Now here, many have seen this icon all over the world and many times in their lives. Now you can superimpose the shroud over this and you'll see how amazing it is. There you go. The face of the shroud superimposed over the icon. So in those days, before they found the cloth, or when they found it in Constantinople, like I said earlier, all you saw was the face of the cloth, the face of the man. You didn't see the whole body. And it looks like they never opened it. They were making icons from the face of the cloth. Coins were, printed in memory of the cloth, or the face. Here again, the face from the shroud, the size of a nickel. Superimpose that coin or with the face on the cloth. That did it. Thought I had a few more now.
Well, that's the end of the slideshow.
Mm-hmm.
And no doubt people are saying, did you see that? Did you
hope so.
hear what he said?
I hope
Did you?
so.
Now, a lot has happened over the years, and every few years, the subject of the Shroud of Turin comes back.
Right.
Have you ever been there?
Never. I went right
Wouldn't
by,
you love
close
to
by.
go? Did you? I would love to go.
I went close by it. I was on a pilgrimage, believe it or not, in 2001 with a bunch of monks from they hear me now. From Sherbrooke, Benedictine monks. We went to fantastic 21 days. We went all over France and Italy, and of course, coming back to leave through France, went right by Turin, but we didn't have time to stop. And we stayed at monasteries all over Europe.
What an experience.
Unbelievable. To stay in these 9th and 10th century monasteries, and follow their regime, get up early in the morning, and tour during the day. I still am amazed by it. I want to go back eventually and do another pilgrimage. And stay only in monasteries, But... no, I never saw it. I never saw the cloth. Of course, they don't take it out every year. Very seldom take it out, especially when they want to do some investigation on it. Now, the carbon dating they did about maybe, I'd say 10 years ago, most people who examined it with carbon dating said it was a fake. Well, there's no paint on the cloth at all. It's just that burnt image. But yet, the little piece of cloth they were given to test, they said that you couldn't test it because it had a kind of a glaze on it. Like for over the years, like a plastic glaze on the cloth, and it wouldn't do good at testing. And of course, when you look at the people who tested it, they were out to say it was a fake no matter. As far as I'm concerned, their minds were made up before the testing results came in, as far as I'm concerned. So as far as I'm concerned, to me, it is legit. It's authentic. We don't have to believe in it to be Catholics. It's not a matter of faith. But I think it is something that kind of supports the passion and death of Christ. And if you've seen the movie, now you've seen this, put the two together.
It certainly has captured curiosity of people all around the world ever since I can remember, and hundreds of years before that.
Oh, yes.
And maybe the final chapter hasn't been written. Maybe there will be, maybe science can come along and say, yes, it is. But until that time, people like you will be showing, you said this is the only set of these slides you know.
As far as I know, yeah. The only one that I bought those many years ago. And of course, every so often you get a few more editions that come out, a couple of new slides, that to keep adding to it. But no, I don't know of anybody else that has a set of slides like this. I honestly don't.
I haven't actually read anything current about the Shroud of Turin until we came here today, but now you've piqued more of my own curiosity, and I will get on the internet tonight and see what other people are saying around the world.
There is a website, by the way.
Oh, there is?
There is a website for the Shroud of Turin. And it's, just get on and just go into Google and say Shroud of Turin, you've got it, man.
I'm very good at Googling things.
But you'd be amazed of all the recent stuff that's in there. It's been updated. And once you sign on, they keep giving you the updates. And that's where that new update came out about, the nails, instead of going through the wrist, going through the palm of the hand. Now, it's amazing. Can you imagine that angle it was going through? It come out in the wrist to hold the body. Very sharp angle. And a lot of other things that they're finding too. You know, they're always looking at this cloth, they're always examining it, because it's a very, very important type of, you know, item of interest. And I honestly believe, I've always believed for the last 40 years that it's authentic. Now I can't, you know, people say, well, I don't know of any miracles that occurred because of the cloth. Well, you know, maybe there have been some. Maybe they weren't published. You know, just because you have a miracle with something doesn't mean it makes it authentic. You know, well, that's a whole other area to get into.
Well, this is absolutely the right time of year to be thinking about it. That's why we're recording this on the 10th day of March for showing around this time of year, because now we're in the middle of Lent.
Almost done.
I'm trying to uphold all the promises that I made, and you know.
I'm exempt. Because of age.
You paid your dues, huh? Oh,
No.
boy, then I ought to really be exempt.
Because that's all right. We still have
anyway,
to fast. It doesn't hurt to fast.
You're still adding your own chapters to this story. You
Oh,
said
yeah.
you've done this hundreds and hundreds of times.
Yes, yeah.
Are you available to show it to other groups?
Oh, yeah. Anybody who wants to see it, you know, as an organization or a group in a church, it doesn't have to be a Catholic group, any Christian group, you know, that believes in the death and resurrection of Christ. And I'll be more than happy to go and talk about it. And, you know, at a leisure, we'll show the slides and we'll discuss it. You know.
Once again, for those people who might have tuned in late, I hope they get an opportunity to see the whole show, because it is so utterly fascinating. This is Noel Hinerth,
E-R-T-H.
E-R-T-H. And how can people reach you? Is it easy to find you at home or here?
Just call the rectory in Ross's Point. And if you want my number, it's on the bulletin of the church bulletin. It's not in the phone book.
I wouldn't be surprised if you get a few calls saying, can you come and talk to our ladies group, or can you come and talk to our...
I've been all over with this thing, you know, and...
Other states or just New York?
Other states.
Have
also.
you really?
Oh,
New England states?
New England, my home area.
How about Canada? No?
No, Canada, no. I could do it in French, though, if I had to. I speak fluent French, by the way.
Do you really?
I could do it in French.
No, you don't speak German, though, huh?
No, not a bit. My father never spoke German for some reason. I don't know. He was born and brought up in Champlain, right here, and never learned German, but he could speak French. He spoke fluent French. The whole family did. Of course, in those days, if you didn't speak French in Champlain, there was something wrong with you.
I love the French language, but unfortunately I've never learned to speak it fluently, and that's too bad, because on my mother's side it's French heritage all the way.
We're all Frank. We call ourselves Franco-Americans, you know, because my father grew up with Calvin's father. They know each other well. My father's dead now, but when I see his father, we tease each other, you know.
Still hanging in there. After
Oh,
all this
yeah,
time.
that's good. That's good.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, anything else you want to add? I know you were suggest to people that they study about this. I mean, hopefully we've shown them quite a bit here today and explained a lot. But you said in the beginning, think about it, draw your own conclusions, study it.
It's not a matter of fate. So if you don't really, if you don't believe in it, it's not going to jeopardize anything. It's up to you. You make your own conclusion. Do you believe in it or not? But like I said, get on the internet. You'll find all kinds of stuff on the Shroud of Turin internet. It's got all kind of stuff. And they got beautiful pictures. I've showed you some here. They got some beautiful ones there that you can print. And they got all the latest, you know, scientific discoveries on the cloth. And it's worth it. You know, if you're going to go on the internet, spend an hour. Browse through it and get into the Shroud.
Those last scientists thought they closed the book, but I don't think they did, based on what you've told us here today. And with technology advancing exponentially every year, there will ultimately, perhaps, science will come around and find a way to say, yeah, this is. Don't give me an argument.
You know, those three captains from the university in Colorado, the Air Force University, they became converts because of their studies.
I know they did.
You know, and they wrote books on this. I mean, really, thick books on their studies at the Shroud. And they're the ones that, you know, had found that when you printed this thing, say, by some machine, maybe by Xerox, that you had a three-dimensional imprint. And normally, I was told, I'm not an expert in photography, but they say you take a picture, it's a two-dimensional imprint on a photography. Where this one's a three. Well, there's something to be said here. Why? Why is this three-dimensional and most things are two-dimensional? You know, a lot of unanswered questions. Then again, when you take a picture of a negative, I didn't know that, you get a positive.
A lot of food for thought.
I mean, why are you getting a positive? Normally when you take a picture, not necessarily with the digital cameras, but in the old days, you got a negative first and you brought it to the photographer and he developed it for you.
Yeah.
Then in 1898 was the first photograph taken. I mean, in 1898, they said, what's going on here?
Yeah.
So before 1898.
Oh, they had photography for 50 years before that.
Yeah.
It's just, but it's absolutely amazing. You have certainly given us a great deal of food for thought.
Yeah, well, it's a good
Especially
time.
at this time of year, it's a good idea for us to think about the life and death of Christ. That's what our religion is based on.
Yes.
And I want to personally thank you for all you've done to spread the word.
Thank you.
My goodness, if you're not canonized in the next...
No, don't say that. No, I won't be canonized. I'm shooting for purgatory.
Well, it's a good thing that you've done, Noel, and we thank you for allowing us to come up here with you today, St. Mary's Church in Champlain, and talk about the Shroud of Turin.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you welcome comments from people who may be watching,
yeah,
who have their own opinions.
Yeah, sure.
Because that's what a theory is based on. And for you, it's way more than a theory at this point in your life.
I've been doing this for years. You know, it's a study. It's, I like to get the new stuff out. There's a brand new book that just came out within the last 2 weeks on the Shroud of Veronica. Remember the one that...
Oh, yeah.
The one, the Stations of the Cross, when this woman came up and wiped his face with a cloth and he left his image on it. Well, that's coming back now. And that's because of an interest in the studying of it. And they're saying that that's authentic also. In the back of that book, there's a good section on the Shroud of Turin again. You pick up a magazine of intellectual ability, let's put it that way. You always find articles, on the Shroud. Something new's just come out, or the authenticity of it, or somebody said it's not authentic. That's fine. You can form your own opinion.
Well, I hope they do. I hope people talk about it, comment to you. I know that people will comment to me. They always do. And Calvin Vision over here, the man behind the camera, Calvin Castine, gets lots of comments too.
Good man.
So we know that people do appreciate the kind of thing we're trying to do here. The best of you over this Lent and Easter season, Noel, and thanks again for all you've done to spread the word.
You're welcome.
Have a great day, and who knows where we're going to be next time for our little corner.